No bird pie for Mr. Twit. The next morning, when Mr. Twit came out with his huge basket to snatch all the birds from the big dead tree, there wasn't a single one on it. They were all sitting on top of the monkey cage. The roly-poly bird was there too, and Muggle and his family were inside the cage, and the whole lot of them were laughing at Mr. Twit. Still no bird pie for Mr. Twit. Mr. Twit wasn't going to wait another week for his bird pie supper. He loved bird pie. It was his favourite meal. So that very same day he went after the birds again. This time he smeared all the top bars of the monkey cage with sticky glue, as well as the branches of the big dead tree. "Now I'll get you," he said, "whichever one you sit on." The monkeys crouched inside the cage watching all this, and later on, when the roly-poly bird came swooping in for an evening chat, they shouted out, "Don't land on our cage, roly-poly bird, it's covered in sticky glue. So is the tree." And that evening, as the sun went down and all the birds came in again to roost, the roly-poly bird flew round and round the monkey cage and the big dead tree, singing out his warning. "There's sticky stuff now on the cage and the tree. If you land on either, you'll never be free. So fly high, fly away, stay up high, or you'll finish up in tomorrow's hot bird pie." Mr. and Mrs. Twit go off to buy guns. The next morning, when Mr. Twit came out with his huge basket, not a single bird was sitting on either the monkey cage or the big dead tree. They were all perched happily on the roof of Mr. Twit's house. The roly-poly bird was up there as well, and the monkeys were in the cage, and the whole lot of them were hooting with laughter at Mr. Twit. "I'll wipe that silly laugh off your beaks," Mr. Twit screamed at the birds. "I'll get you next time, you filthy, feathery frumps. I'll wring your necks, the whole lot of you, and have you bubbling in a pot for bird pie before the day is out." "How are you going to do that then?" asked Mrs. Twit, who had come outside to see what all the noise was about. "I won't have you smearing sticky glue all over the roof of our house." Mr. Twit got very excited. "I've got a great idea," he cried. He didn't bother to keep his voice down because he didn't think the monkeys could understand. "We'll both go into town right away and we'll buy a gun each," he shouted. "How's that?" "Brilliant!" cried Mrs. Twit, grinning and showing her long yellow teeth. "We'll buy those big shotguns that spray out 50 bullets or more with each bang." "Exactly," said Mr. Twit. "Lock up the house while I go and make sure the monkeys are safely away." Mr. Twit went over to the monkey cage. "Attention," he barked in his fearsome monkey trainer's voice. "Upside down, all of you, and jump to it, one on top of the other. Quick, get on with it, or you'll feel Mrs. Twit's stick across your backside." Obediently, the poor monkeys stood on their hands and clambered one on top of another, with Muggle at the bottom and the smallest child at the top. "Now stay there until we come back," Mr. Twit ordered. "Don't you dare move. Don't overbalance. And when we return in 2 or 3 hours' time, I shall expect to find you in exactly the same position as you are now. You understand?" With that, Mr. Twit marched away. Mrs. Twit went with him, and the monkeys were left alone with the birds. Muggle has an idea. As soon as Mr. and Mrs. Twit had disappeared down the road, the monkeys all flipped back onto their feet the right way up. "Quick, get the key," Muggle called out to the roly-poly bird who was sitting on top of the roof of the house. "What key?" shouted the roly-poly bird. "The key to the door of our cage," cried Muggle. "It's hanging on the nail in the workshed. That's where he always puts it." The roly-poly bird flew down and came back with the key in his beak. Muggle reached out with his hand through the bars of the cage and took the key. He put it in the lock and turned it. The door opened. All 4 monkeys leapt out together. "We are free," cried the 2 little ones. "Where should we go, Dad? Where shall we hide?" "Don't get excited," said Muggle. "Calm down, everybody. Before we escape from this beastly place, we have one important thing to do." "What?" "We're going to turn those terrible Twits upside down." "We're going to do what?" they cried. "You must be joking, Dad." "I'm not joking," Muggle said. "We're going to turn Mr. and Twits upside down, with their legs in the air. Don't be ridiculous, the roly-poly bird said. How can we possibly turn those two maggoty old monsters upside down? We can, cried Mugglewub. We are going to make them stand on their heads for hours and hours, perhaps forever. Let them see what it's like for a change. How? Said the roly-poly bird. Just tell me how. Mugglewub laid his head on one side, and a tiny, twinkling little smile touched the corners of his mouth. Now and again, he said, but not very often, I have a brilliant idea. This is one of them. Follow me, my friends, follow me. He scampered off towards the house, and the 3 other monkeys and the roly-poly bird went after him. Buckets and paintbrushes, cried Mugglewub. That's what we want next. There are plenty in the workshed. Hurry up, everyone. Get a bucket and a paintbrush. Inside Mr. Twit's workshed there was an enormous barrel of hug-tight sticky glue, the stuff he used for catching the birds. Fill your buckets, Mugglewub ordered. We are going into the big house. Mrs. Twit had hidden the key to the front door under the mat, and the Mugglewub had seen her doing it, so it was easy for them to get in. In they went, all 4 monkeys, with their buckets of sticky glue. Then came the roly-poly bird flying in after them, with a bucket in his beak and a brush in his claw.